Healing the mother wound. Healing the mother wound, particularly for men, and dealing with this pain, and it can be very, very challenging. Healing the mother wound can be extremely painful and extremely difficult, very challenging. And so I received a question from a young man that wanted to know how to heal this mother wound. And I want to read this question to you and then go into answering this and expanding on how the mother wound affects us, particularly as men, and what we can do to begin to heal that, and why maybe we are affected by a mother wound, where it really comes from. So here's the question. As a young man, how the hell do we heal mother wounds that feel as if they are negatively affecting all areas of our lives? I honestly have no idea what to do. I see boys needing as much maternal. I see boys needing this maternal nurturing, and I have no idea what to do. Feels like I'm on this relentless search, and I don't want women to feel they need to care for me constantly. Being 23 and this aware of this stuff is difficult for me to deal with. Any advice or any suggestions? So yes, I do, and I deal with this on a regular basis. And we as boys, as males, we have the right to learn about our emotions and learn how to express our emotions just as much as anyone else. And it's imperative that we do. And societal values, they often discourage boys and young men to recognize and express their feelings and emotions. And so we get this stuck in this vortex and we feel constricted in our expression. And we're deeply, deeply challenged by that. Growing up, boys will often hear statements like, grow up, don't be such a baby. Men or big boys or boys don't cry. And this, compounded over time, it stunts our emotional expression. And this can have serious consequences, not only on our emotional health, but also our mental health and the way that we then relate to ourselves and relate to others. It affects our emotional well-being, which can often lead to anxiety and depression and extreme bouts of anger. And of course, that impacts our interpersonal relationships. It also impacts, how we feel about who we are, how we feel about our own sense of self, and it damages us in that way. The mother wound can be described as having a mother that was potentially not emotionally available when growing up. Perhaps the mother was distant. Perhaps she was very critical of herself, of her family, of you. She was cold. She was pulled away. She could have also been very anxious and preoccupied, whether it be with work, with her own personal stuff. Maybe she was depressed herself. Maybe she was anxious herself and she withheld emotion. She couldn't emotionally regulate herself. Could have been for many reasons. She didn't deal with her own wounding, her own pain. Often the mother herself was emotionally neglected or even abused. It's very, very common. So many females are abused in different ways. In fact, human beings, boys and girls far more. And this affects the way they give and receive love as well, and give and receive affection and care. And this is very important to understand. And so if they've been abused, then it's going to be very difficult for them to be loving and nurturing, because they've got this constriction, this fear, and this stunted aspect of expression in the world as well. And so maybe your family also struggled to make ends meet. So financially, it was very difficult for your family to thrive, and you were just surviving. So mum was away a lot for work. She was not present to your needs. She wasn't able to nurture you, even be there for you as a baby, because she had other preoccupations. And so you were looked after by strangers or babysitters or even other family members. Now, if you were blessed enough to have experienced love and affection from those babysitters and those family members, that's great. But there's still something missing in the mother wound, in not getting that from the mother. Inconsistency in how the mother related to you, or how your mother related to you growing up, that plays a massive, massive role as well with respect to how you see yourself. So there are different ways that the mother wound affects us, and particularly, again, I'm really referring to men here more than anything else. Almost consequences of the mother wound. Of course, though, this very much affects all of us, and we miss that compassion, that nurturance, that empathy. We then struggle to give that to ourselves, and we struggle to then give that to others. Being empathetic, understanding, compassionate, being able to connect with other human beings is a beautiful trait that so many of us need. And so one of the consequences of having the mother wound is confusion. We have confusion when we're younger. We have confusion around our emotions. We're unable to label our emotions. We're unable to label who we are. And we get confused about how our mother's treating us. And so we often seek for this nurturance, this caretaking role in other women as we grow up, whether we're in a normative heterosexual relationship or whether we're in another form of relationship. That's not too relevant, but we seek for this excessive nurturance and even approval and presence of the mother. Because we felt so emotionally neglected, we struggle to be emotionally centered. And so any other trauma that we also experienced as a child where we didn't feel supported, we feel confused and baffled as to why that happened and why weren't we kept safe. And so in society, mothers described as having characteristics such as being warm and caring, perhaps like a peer's mother or a mother in a film, as things that we witness. But when our own mother appeared distant, even cold or scary, maybe violent or aberrant, we become even more confused. So this confusion sets in and it's very, very difficult to feel safe. And in not feeling safe, we often as boys behave in extreme ways. And behaving in extreme ways is not healthy for us, it's not healthy for our relationships, it's not healthy for how we show up in the world. And so we almost wreak havoc, right? Like we are so disconnected. And so learning to soothe our own selves becomes immensely challenging. Another consequence of the mother wound or how we're affected is we have this difficulty to access our emotions. And so we find it difficult to be emotionally agile, intelligent, to deal with difficulty, and we find it difficult to adapt. We get confused very easy, but we get overwhelmed very easy when things change a great deal. And so we can't really name our internal sensations, and we become very frustrated, or we withdraw from the world. Usually when we're frustrated, we become overtly aggressive. And so we'll have these adult temper tantrums. We'll have adult-based temper tantrums as adults. As children, it's okay, and it's like normal per se, they're terrible twos, but it's not really. It is to a certain extent as we're finding our place in the world, but this usually continues. And so over time, we compartmentalize our feelings and we become cut off from our emotions. And so feelings of sadness, overwhelming feelings of sadness, disappointment, feelings of loss, they become masked generally by anger and aggression. And that's projected out into the world or projected inwardly towards self. Think about that for a moment. Maybe you've been that person. And part of it can be because you haven't had this strong, solid connection to mum. And it can come out in random places, like you're in a traffic jam or you're road rage or you're just at home or you drop something. I was like this. I would drop a plate, mainly because I witnessed my father being so agitated and so disconnected, because my grandmother was a beautiful woman, but she had 8 children. So he didn't get the attention. She was distant. She loved, and she loved deeply, but he didn't get that attention. And so he was very cut off from his emotions, and that progressed down the line. And there were other complications with my mother as well in terms of the enmeshment, the emotional and spiritual enmeshment. And it lent itself to me being a very frustrated, angry young man. I couldn't emotionally regulate, and that was tough. Another issue that we face is we long for a mother's love. Like, we say we're okay with our mother not being emotionally available and being maybe, even critical, but we've numbed our feelings and our sadness and longing for mum. And we want that loving gaze, we want that smile, we want that connection, and we yearn for it. And sometimes we will pursue it in unhealthy ways. Perhaps you told yourself, yeah, you'd be okay, but you don't really feel that. And so one of the remedies for this is allowing yourself to acknowledge the pain and the sadness around this, allowing yourself to really acknowledge this missing and this longing for mum's love, and being okay with that, like really being okay with that. And let me go back a moment. The difficulty in accessing our emotions And labeling our emotions, one of the tools that we can use and how we begin to heal that is when we feel angry, we pause, we take a breath. We have a process and a system for being with our body, and we label, okay, I'm angry right now. And at the beginning, that's all we need to do. I'm sad right now. I'm frustrated right now. And then we can go on. But we get into this habit of labeling our emotions, and it helps us grow through these pains. It really does. Another issue that we face is self-worth, self-esteem, self-value issues. A nurturing mother helps us develop this sense of I am lovable, I am worthy, I am enough, I am here, I am good enough, I am able enough. The attachment gaze gives a message to the baby, I'm wonderful in the eyes of the other. We get that feedback, we make it mean that. And when a mother fails to be present with her baby, this message can be received as I don't matter, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not important enough. And we take that on into our adult lives, especially as men. And so we go out into the world trying to prove ourselves in extreme ways, because men do usually do that, boys will do that. And this message internalized impacts our sense of self-esteem. So we have to put a false bravado out in the world. I did so much of that. I was so not confident, so full of shame and guilt and pain and confusion. And I masked it with this false bravado, this pretense that I'm this amazing man, but I didn't feel enough. And so I was always overcompensating. And I was always looking for validation outside of myself, which is a big thing, which turns us to the next thing. And the shame that's associated with that, by the way, is fucking intense. That takes me to the next thing, though, around our ability to not soothe internally. We can't self-regulate. And so the mother wound sometimes leaves a man feeling hollow and searching for love and validation and worthiness outside of himself, searching for someone to nurture him and love him outside of himself. And it's extremely painful and extremely uncomfortable. And this shame, this image of a soothing mother is all that you want, unconsciously and or consciously. It's all that you can think about. And I mean, you look to, as a man, you fill in the comfort, you fill in the addiction, alcohol, drugs, gambling, workaholism, food, meaningless relationships, pornography, masturbation, sex, all in excess. No matter how much you try to fill this void externally, it's an internal void and gap that needs to be filled within yourself. And as men, we need to stop projecting outside of ourselves. We need support. In this case, this is what we do. We find support, counseling, therapy, an AA group, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Sex Addicts Anonymous or some type of support group. Have accountability in our lives that helps us look internally, that gives us tools to look internally for our self-worth and our validation, to make ourselves happy. Finding hobbies, connecting to our values and living out those values. This is very important. Going through a process of feeling that pain that we felt as a child and not re-experiencing it, but releasing the pain and the fear and the feelings that were associated with those experiences that we never allowed ourselves to experience as young people. And we get to move through that as adults. So we get to find that support and really be connected to that. And that's an important thing to do as well. And so we don't look outside of ourselves, but we look inside of ourselves. Beautifully empowering, right? And over time, with that support group reflecting back to us, mirroring back to us, challenging us, pulling us forward in healthy ways, that's how we grow as men. And we stop blaming others. We stop projecting these needs on our partners, expecting our partners or other women in our lives to fill these gaps. A lot of pressure. They don't deserve that, and we don't deserve that. And I learned that the hard way. I had to heal those wounds and go within myself and make those shifts and changes. And it was a powerful process. And one of the last things is relationship difficulties. We struggle in our romantic connections to be expressive. We are distant. We don't talk. We learn about how to be in relationship early on in our relationships. And so the models of the relationships that we experience when we're young dictate and determine the quality of the relationships that we experience as adults. And so the opportunity for us is, if we've had that mother wound where our mother wasn't nurturing and she wasn't meeting our emotional needs, we generally grow up with a view of relationships that we can't trust people, and that someone can't be there for us emotionally. So we go into the world saying, I have to do everything myself. I have to rely only on myself. So then we become even more isolated. And if we are in relationship, what we generally do is still do things on our own. And we make the other person, we make them the attacker, we make them the enemy. And we look, because we're conditioned through patterns and familiarity and a sense of hurt. We don't want to be hurt again. We look for evidence. We collect evidence that that person isn't there for us. See, they're not there for us. See, they're not there for us. And then we behave in accordance with that false perception of self and false perception of what's happening, and we push people away. And then they break up with us. And then the ego says, see, can't trust. See, it's the same as mum. And this is an unconscious pattern, but this is massive. And then the distance just grows and grows and grows and grows. Maybe write a letter to your mum. Maybe express all that anger that you never expressed. Maybe ask why. Maybe learn what happened. Maybe just express the raw anger and the sadness and the density that you're experiencing and feeling. And she never has to see that letter, and then you get to burn it up and rip it up. Maybe that releases and dislodges some old emotion. And maybe you get to experience some support with everything that you're doing, because that's really, really important as well. Really important. Because as men, as human beings, we have a responsibility to deal with our stuff. And when we deal with our stuff, we shift the course of our future. And we show up in a healthy relationship, in a healthy way that allows others to do the same. And that impacts our families and the people that they have, and our communities and the people that they have contact with. It impacts them because we're showing up in healthy, adjusted ways, ways that allow us to see ourselves in the most authentic of ways. And that's empowering. And that's what I want for you. Don't let any wound, any depth of relationship experienced in a way that has been negative to you, in a way that's hurt you, don't let that fall into and leak. Don't fall into that. Don't lean into that. And don't let that leak into your adult relationships. Your adult relationships, and you deserve better. You are more worthy than that. Seek support. Be with those that see you. Ask people in your life to really, really notice you, to really appreciate you, to tell you 3 things that they love about you, to help build your self-worth, and have a number of different people do this, honestly, and receive that. Because part of the mother wound is not being able to receive love. And so we push love away if we can't receive it. Maybe learn to take compliments, accept and say, thank you, I receive that. That's your practice. Just say that. Just say, thank you, I receive that. Thank you, I receive that. That's it, nothing else. I want to thank you so much for being here. All of you that have come on live or that are watching the replay, I appreciate you. Brendan, brother, I love you. I miss you. It's been way too long. Thank you. It's our duty. It's our responsibility to heal our wounding, to love ourselves through it with compassion and openness and transparency. And the world deserves that now more than ever. Pound blessings to you people. Thank you for being here.